RWBY music. If there's one thing both fans and detractors of RWBY tend to agree on, it's that the music in the show slaps like Blake Belladonna. This applies to the OST by Jeff Williams, yes, but it goes double for the vocal themes mostly performed by his daughter, Casey Lee Williams. From the OPs to the character themes, RWBY has always been lauded for its forays into alternative metal. On top of that, Casey Lee Williams has become the lead vocalist of the progressive metal band OK Goodnight, and they performed a song for Volume 8. As such, this show has become a great entry point for teenagers and young adults to consider getting into metal, and I'm here to help with that. After all, I've made no secret of my love for extreme music, including metal, which I have a decent bit of experience with. Let's get a few things straight before I present my list of bands. This list is less about going from most popular to least popular, and more of a broad, sliding scale of accessibility. We're starting with bands I get some enjoyment in that can easily be picked up by the average RWBY fan due to similarities in the genre, sound, and heaviness. We'll be delving closer to more extreme metal towards the end of this list, but I'm gonna try to keep it relevant. I'm probably not gonna throw your favorite death metal or black metal band on this list, so to any dedicated metalheads or even metal elitists watching this, don't be too disappointed when I don't bring up Emperor or Gorguts. RWBY music isn't much heavier than the stuff you'd hear on your dad's rock radio station like Twisted Sister or Guns N' Roses, so we're gonna start off relatively light and work our way down. Also, while we're not gonna start off with Japanese music, expect Japanese bands to make a decent chunk of the list. RWBY is heavily inspired by anime, and a significant chunk of its fan base includes anime fans. With all that out of the way, here are 10 bands to get RWBY fans into metal.
Now I will tell you what I've done for you.
Melodramatic to a fault, Evanescence is one of the defining alternative metal bands for teenagers in the 2000s. Much like Casey Lee Williams, vocalist Amy Lee has a distinct, booming voice guiding these alt-metal cuts and piano ballads. For as much as people rag on this band, and especially the track Bring Me to Life, I do find that Evanescence produces some solid tunes in the albums Fallen and The Open Door. Going Under and Sweet Sacrifice are good examples of their more straightforward alt cuts, while Whisper and Weight of the World are examples of tracks spiced up by the more symphonic and choir elements. My Immortal and Lithium are examples of some of their more beloved ballads, and Lose Control, probably my favorite song of theirs, is a cool trip-hop infused metal cut. This isn't the most glowing recommendation in the world, it's just that we gotta start somewhere the average RWBY fan would find recognizable, considering the show's vocals. Evanescence is good if you want more symphonic, gothic alt metal with a good female vocalist with clean singing. It's also probably as nostalgic to many RWBY fans as Linkin Park is in terms of being the go-to angst music for millions of millennial and zoomer teens. Like me. I think if it were less compressed, I'd probably bump some of the tracks up more often, because I don't exactly consider them low on the totem pole in terms of nostalgic 90s and 2000s metal acts. They just feel held back a lot of the time, and that's with their earlier, better regarded records. I can say much the same about their self-titled record, which does have some solid stuff like What You Want and Made of Stone, but less of the symphonic elements people come to love. The only other mainline album in their discography, not counting the Origin demo, is The Bitter Truth, which is often considered their weakest release. Synthesis is a more classically driven reworking of old material, with some new stuff here and there if you're curious, and really like said early material. Feel free to do what you want with those if you like the first two records and wanted to try out the rest of their discog, especially given how shockingly short it is. So if you like the more sinister RWBY tracks like Sacrifice and Divide, or if you like tracks that belt out a character's pained emotions like Red Like Roses Part 2, this will probably be up your alley. I had a decent time with some of these records, and some of you might even recognize this band from the Devil May Cry cartoon insert Afterlife. Speaking of recognizable gothic metal bands, let's move on to our next subject. Welcome to the first of many Japanese bands on this list. Yousei Teikoku was originally more of a pop band with gothic, sometimes symphonic flavors to sell this brooding fairy kingdom vibe the band's name translates to. However, as time went on, they started incorporating more metal into their identity. Nowadays, they're more of a symphonic metal band than anything else. Anime fans watching this video might recognize them from the first Mirai Nikki OP, as well as its second ED and the Redial OP, among other Annie songs. Yui Itsuki's iconic vocals guided the band for over 2 decades now, regardless of whatever form their sound took. Be it their dead and buried dance pop 90s material, their more gothic resurrection in the mid-2000s, or the symphonic metamorphosis they went on since then and crystallized in the 2010s. We're mainly going to look at that 2010s output. Pax Vasanya, Hades the Other World, and The Age of Villains are all excellent starting points, especially that last one. Pax has the first Mirai Nikki OP, as well as other imposing alt and symphonic metal cuts like Herrscher and Astral Dogma. Hades the Other World rocks tracks like Hades the End, DX Crisis, and the second Mirai Nikki ED. Finally, The Age of Villains is my absolute favorite album of theirs, with heavy bangers like Rancho Aion, Paradiso Inferno, Phantom Terror, and Arutsuyoku, Bocho Uchi ni Okeru, Shinkai Sunabashi Suiten. Hell, that entire album is their heaviest and coolest. Of course, let's not write off what they made pre-Pax Vasanya. The Gothic Lolita trilogy of albums still contains metallic bangers like Hades the Bloody Rage. Even outside of those songs, there's some great non-metal tracks like the Renken Sankyu Magical OP and the Kurokami EDs, especially the first one. I'm also not gonna say I'm consistently head over heels for most of their albums like I am for Hades the Other World and The Age of Villains. I should also note that a lot of their albums are compilations of singles with some new tracks sprinkled in, and even Pax Vasanya is a bit inconsistent for me. Granted, Hades the Other World is also a compilation with new stuff, but I find that album to be more consistent, and of course, The Age of Villains is just stacked bangers after bangers, with basically no anime or VN material as far as I know. This band has a vast catalog worth checking out, whether you're looking for anime music, gothic J-pop, or some relatively accessible gothic metal. As a result, this is one of the stronger recommendations on the list. Oh, and to those who are in the know and are aware of the band Tenkishiki Karen Ongaku Shudan, a symphonic power metal and pop band starring a certain alter ego, consider that a bonus recommendation. BAND-MAID is a Japanese heavy metal and hard rock band, which makes them the softest act on this list. This is definitely the most accessible band on the list, if you can get over language barriers. Some of the anime fans out there may have heard of them from the Log Horizon Season 3 OP, both versions of the Platinum End OP, or the 4th Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains ED. As you've also noticed, their gimmick is about being a band made up of maids. This is also the only all-female band on this list. I've fallen off them a fair bit over the years, but I'd still recommend New Beginning and World Domination as good albums to start with. Real Existence, I Can't Live Without You, Glory, and Different are some highlight songs across their discography, as they're among the heavier cuts out there. And yes, those latter two are indeed the 4th Vrains ED and Log Horizon Season 3 OP. I admit I have less to say about them than any other band on this list, mainly cause almost all their songs are straightforward rock and metal cuts you can easily imagine fitting as an anime OP or ED. I also find that they get poppier and more into that soft, hard rock after World Domination, and the albums absolutely fall off for me once we get to that point. It's kinda cheating even including this band, since by now they're basically just a hard rock band, but you could still argue the music they made before the Conqueror album qualifies as metal. They're a solid, accessible rock band that at one point could be argued as a metal band, that point being their prime if you ask me. Kinda like with Ghost. Anyways, this list is only gonna get heavier from here, so strap yourselves in, folks. Even if you've never heard the term Visual Kei before, you've probably heard examples if you're an anime fan. From the Black Butler OPs, except for the new one, to the first Death Note OP. From most Yu-Gi-Oh songs to some Full Metal Alchemist songs. A movement filled to the brim with aesthetic subcultures, Visual Kei is inspired by the Western world's glam rock and metal imports to Japan, and it outlived the scenes that inspired it. The GazettE is one such example, being most known in the States for the Black Butler 2 OP. They're an alternative metal outfit from the mid-2000s with a discography as lengthy as Deftones. As for where to start, I'd say Nil and Dim are your best bets. The former oscillates between dingy alt-metal and more sentimental alt-rock cuts, with some new metal thrown in there with the alt stuff. We get grimy cuts like Nausea and Shudder, alongside more energetic pieces like Barata and the beautiful ballads like DLN. Meanwhile, Dim is a more dreary, dour, and grandiose album, with the likes of Nakigahara, Distress and Coma, and Dim's Scene. It doesn't forget its heavier, energetic cuts like The Invisible Wall and In the Middle of Chaos, nor its ballads like The Wonderful Guren. Feel free to do whatever with the rest of their discography though, if I'm being honest. Even the albums I recommended here aren't the most consistent, and most of the rest tend to be much edgier and more scattershot. They do have their ballads for those looking for them, and some genuine highlights here and there. Tracks like Hedoro and Ibitu come to mind. But while I do like their vocalist Ruki when he's doing clean vocals, I'm not as keen on his harsher, growl-heavy vocals compared to some of the other bands on this list. Some VK fans might get annoyed that I'm putting the GazettE here, and not something like Dex Score or Diran Grey, but I actually like the GazettE, and it's my list, so Hey, wait a minute. What's that sound? Deftones is widely considered the best nu metal band, and the only one whose music stayed remotely good by the 2010s. Where bands like Linkin Park and Korn fizzled out for many fans, Deftones continued to thrive for the most part. Granted, they're more known as an alt-metal band by this point, and neither they, nor many nu metal bands for that matter, thrilled with that label being thrown onto them, but regardless, they're one of the most beloved metal bands from the 90s, with a solid, lengthy discography. Hell, most bands that last for over 10 years wind up having a lot of duds after a while, but not Deftones. Combining a more sensual, disgusting, or desperate sound with ethereal scapes and thunderous alt-metal cuts is their bread and butter. White Pony is by far the best in my eyes, firing all these aspects on all cylinders. The frail and wistful teenager, the livid and sticky elite, or the grotesque digital bath and changes are all wonderful examples on an already stacked album. It's one of the biggest red flag records out there in terms of lyrical content, but fuck it, I love it. Around the Fur also has plenty of great cuts for the majority of its run, such as My Own Summer, Labia, and Be Quiet and Drive. That album, the self-titled record, and Diamond Eyes lean more towards the heavy side of Deftones, while Saturday Night Wrist, Koi no Yokan, and Ohms throw in slower, more shoegazy cuts into the mix, not unlike White Pony. You're generally gonna lean one way or the other in terms of which side of Deftones you prefer, with me broadly preferring the more mixed to heavy approaches of White Pony, Koi no Yokan, and Around the Fur. There's also their newest album, Private Music, which puts their discography in a blender with great tracks like CXZ, Infinite Source, and I Think About You All the Time. 30 years later, and this band is still avoiding the washed allegations. That being said, while I'm not over the moon on most of their discography compared to White Pony, there's still plenty of tracks and albums worth discovering. You're still getting plenty of great songs like Rosemary, Ohms, Leathers, Hole in the Earth, and Rocket Skates with their other offerings. Even some of their lesser joints like their self-titled record, Gore, and Ohms have stuff like Acid Hologram, Anniversary of an Uninteresting Event, and the aforementioned Ohms title track. I admit I'm not keen on a lot of their softer cuts, except for Teenager and Anniversary of an Uninteresting Event, but even some of those tracks are widely beloved by fans, namely Beware and Entombed. Unlike some other nu metal or alt-metal bands, or even bands with long discographies, there really isn't an album that tends to be seen as outright bad. Not even the softer and frankly kinda boring Gore, which is often labeled as their worst. Definitely try out White Pony at the very least. Maybe even Koi no Yokan, Private Music, or Around the Fur if you want a first pick that isn't as obvious. There's a reason they were seen as the peak of nu metal when they dabbled in that space, and are considered a seminal classic in the alt-metal space today. Speaking of seminal classic alt-metal bands, welcome to the world of progressive metal, the subgenre known for its long songs that start at point A and end at point Z. This one goes out to all the folks who like that one OK Goodnight song in RWBY Volume 8 and the Proggy Volume 9 OP. Tool has long been celebrated since the 90s for its blend of meaty alt-metal cuts and prog metal, as well as for constantly keeping listeners on their toes with their frequent time signature changes and technical prowess. Unlike, say, Dream Theater, they didn't become derided for supposed musical wankfests as time went on. Though that's not to say none of their 6, 8, or even 11 plus minute songs can't be endurance tests in their roughly 70-minute albums. This is also the last band on the list that will operate primarily on clean singing. though Maynard's vocals are a bit more coarse than other clean vocals in alt metal, even compared to, say, Chino from Deftones when he isn't screaming. Lateralis and Anima are their most celebrated albums, though with the exception of their divisive revival album Fear Inoculum, their catalog is widely regarded across the board. Tracks like the dingy, chest-beating song The Grunge, and the more spiritual and metaphysical Parabola stand out without ever feeling exhaustingly long-winded. The latter in particular is among their heaviest and grooviest songs, with plenty of banging riffs accompanying the affirmation of spiritual immortality. There are some grainier, noisier spots and riffs in some groovy tracks like H and Stinkfist, and in general, the band does have a balance between their more spiritual side and their more pessimistic, snarky side. Many of their songs are technical, ever-shifting marvels without ever feeling disjointed like plenty other bands feel. However, I don't really have strong feelings for much of this band's work, and thus not a whole lot to say. They rarely click for me like that, though I do like and respect them well enough. You're in for a long, trippy experience with this band, but if you can get past that and not be too thrown off by all the time signature changes, you'll probably have a good time with one of the most respected, popular metal bands of the past 30 years. Doujin music, or otoke doujin, is a term meant to describe self-published, indie, or non-official music often released by individuals or circles made up of like-minded artists in Japan. Vocaloid music, including covers, and anime or video game music covers and remixes make up the majority of the scene. There are plenty of doujin metal bands in circles from the Toho fandom, for instance, artists making fan creations based on properties such as this. However, out of the ones I listened to so far, Foreground Eclipse is the one I find most suited to this list, with a great female lead vocalist in Madame Pop. Her harsh metalcore growls and clean J-pop singing make for an interesting fusion. So welcome to the world of melodic metalcore. Metalcore is basically a blend of metal and hardcore, and considering this group also tends to skew post-hardcore, it's kind of debatable as to whether or not they should even qualify for this list. I'm including it anyway, fuck you, make a change, kill yourself. While I understand that most people prefer stories that last through the sleepless nights, I'd personally recommend Tears Will Become Melodies Tonight, above all else. Tracks like Fall of Tears and Calm Eyes Fixed on Me Screaming demonstrate why. The former has some of the nicest, most climactic clean singing choruses in their discography, while the latter has some of the heaviest riffs and sickest combos of clean vocals with brutal screams and growls. There's also some straight up pop songs on here that still fit the tone of those records. Like with Evanescence, this isn't so much a strong recommendation based on my preference, but one based on this list's target audience. This doujin group's output is a bit on the spotty side for me, both in and especially outside of the two albums I listed. That being said, if you've been concerned with the lack of female vocalists across the past several entries, and you can handle something a bit more aggressive, this should do the trick. You'll probably like them more than I do. Also, if you like Madame Pop's vocals enough, feel free to consider checking out her non-Foreground Eclipse material. Alright, we're operating a bit more on headspaces with this one. This is for the RWBY fan that identifies with Blake or Crow, bitter with the state of the world while also hating themselves. Fans who want to scratch that early Linkin Park itch of teenage angst and blistering rage. Slipknot is easily one of the most popular and accepted nu metal and alt metal bands from the 90s and 2000s, with their self-titled record and Iowa contributing heavily to their success. Unlike some of the other popular bands I talked about here, Slipknot is brutally heavy. Deftones definitely has its screamier and more nu metal heavy songs, but even their harshest songs can't hold a candle to the intense venom and agony Slipknot erupts. That's why I'm putting this band towards the end of the list. Their self-titled record and Iowa are the best places to start. Self-titled has iconic tracks like Wait and Bleed, while introducing Corey Taylor's visceral screaming and the impeccable drumming of Sean Cram, Chris Fenn, and especially Joey Jordison into the mix. For fans of the rapping in RWBY's Yellow Trailer theme, I Burn, this might also do something for you, even if I don't really prefer that part of Slipknot. Then there's Iowa, which is hatred and misery incarnate. People Equal Shit, My Plague, Skin Ticket, and Metabolic are some of the highlights in a record meant to rip your heart out and shove it into your skull. Well, it's also got some death metal elements after losing the more industrial metal elements of the first record. There are some more melodic cuts and moments in their discography, like on Wait and Bleed, or the chorus of My Plague, which helps smoothen the intensity a bit for a wider audience. It's not all brutality. That being said, you can take or leave the rest of their discography. Plenty of fans consider Volume 3 to be the start of the continual decline that's only slightly halted by We Are Not Your Kind, which was pretty decent, I admit. Plus, people don't tend to vouch for the demo record that came out before Corey Taylor arrived, Mate, Feed, Kill, Repeat. There are some bangers here and there, like Duality, Red Flag, Solway Firth, and Do Nothing / Bitch Slap, but I'd say starting with Self-Titled or Iowa is a safer bet. Afterwards, you can probably just stick to their singles unless you really want to delve deeper into the full discography. Also, while you're at it, go listen to Obi Katy Cat and Dia Riku's cover of Duality. Oh, and also Obi Katy Cat, Zephyrina, and Futokuchi Mana's cover of the Bring Me the Horizon song Kingslayer. On that note, no, I am not nominating Bring Me the Horizon. I'm sorry. We're moving on! You might have gotten a taste of it with Foreground Eclipse, but with this band, I officially welcome you to the wild world of metalcore, a genre that has long since drifted away from being metallic hardcore punk music, and become a bit of a chimera of different metal and hardcore stylings. The UK-based Loathe leans more in the alt-metal with bits of melodic clean singing direction, while also incorporating bits of shoegazy elements. We could also just call them metalcore Deftones if you wanted to be reductive. In some ways, this might be the heaviest band on the list. Now, are they Converge, Nile, or Nails? No, but then again, they're near the end of the list for a reason, and those bands aren't here for a reason. Their 2020 album, I Let It In and Took Everything, is a rather eclectic record. On the one hand, we have blistering alt-metal and metalcore cuts like Broken Vision Rhythm, Red Room, and Heavy is the Head that falls with the weight of 1,000 thoughts. The latter of which is probably the most brutal song on here, even after the amazing Black Days intro. Kadeem Francis' screams and growls are as fierce as the most cutthroat vocalist in that field. On the other hand, we have beautiful, sentimental, shoegazy alt-metal cuts like Two-Way Mirror and Is It Really You. These tracks are absolutely gorgeous, melancholic pieces that play into a more abstract side. Tracks like New Faces in the Dark, Screaming, and the dingy title track combine these two elements, with their sticky riffs and sick transitions between Kadeem's clean vocals and gruff vocals. This album lives up to its title in being the soundtrack to an emotional car crash. Aside from their instrumental, ambient, and drone album from 2021, The Things They Believe, they only have one other full album in 2017's The Cold Sun. This one's more of a concept album, and sounds more like a harsher, grainier version of the kind of metalcore you'd see from the likes of Bullet for My Valentine and Bring Me the Horizon. Dance on My Skin is a huge banger, and while the rest of the album doesn't hit as hard for me, it's still a worthwhile listen. We haven't gotten much from them since 2021, but their latest single, Gifted Every Strength, is my favorite song of theirs so far, and it seems like they might be going in a more proggy direction for their next release. Whenever they drop it. I don't know, maybe like 2027 or some shit at this rate. Anyway, again, if you like Deftones or relate to Blake or Crow, this band is right up your alley. Hell, if you like Sleep Token, a pop and metal band I won't be featuring on this list, some Loathe songs might scratch that particular itch. And the two have even collaborated on a version of Is It Really You. We're nearing the end of our journey, so let's get a bit spiritual, shall we? This last entry goes out to all the fans who like the more proggy, psychedelic Volume 9 OP. Sci-fi prog metal and black metal are this band's bread and butter, with helpings of psychedelic rock here and there. Also yes, we are actually ending on a bit of black metal, accessible as this band is by those standards. Black metal is known for housing some more violent and hateful bands, but metalcore is known for having lead vocalists dating girls as old as RWBY, so... Anyways, hailing from Greece is the mostly English-speaking band Hail Spirit Noir. This band shifts between its more progressive influences and its black metal sounds. Albums such as Eden in Reverse tend to lean more towards the former, while the likes of Fossil Gardens tend to lean more towards the latter. Tracks such as Incense Swirls, Starfront Promenade, and The Temple of Curved Space emphasize the grandiose, spacious scale the band works with. Meanwhile, songs like Alien Liberating and Crossroads emphasize the psychedelic, sci-fi elements of their atmosphere, without losing much of the scale. The aforementioned tracks are easily among my favorites from this band. I'd say, if you can handle the more raw recording style of black metal, even in a crisper form like what prog metal often offers, then this band might be more accessible than the last two I talked about. The band largely incorporates clean singing, and even their harsh black metal singing isn't all that brutal or unintelligible by that genre's standards. If that still sounds like a hard sell, then you still have the album Eden in Reverse, which only has clean singing. Oh, and typical for black metal, a lot of their early albums tend to feature themes of Satanism, so if that's a bit of a turnoff to you for religious reasons, like it kind of is for me, you might want to stick to their later records. But if not, you know, stuff like Pneuma and Mayhem in Blue have a lot of interesting songs to show you, and they tend to be more on the psychedelic side. Also, their fifth album, Mannequins, is actually a synth soundtrack with a physical release that comes with a short story by the same name. So you know, that's pretty cool. This is also probably the most obscure band on the list. So combined with being part of one of the least accessible broad genres in all of metal, I'd say this is a perfect endpoint to our journey. So, yeah. I hope you found at least one band you're interested in from this list, and good luck on your metal journey, folks. I'm off to do another side quest, and the next video after that will be part 2 of the RWBY retrospective. Things are gonna get a bit complicated. Well, till next time. Oh, and before you go, if you're interested in listening to any of these albums, or just interested in supporting my work in general, feel free to join my server for only $1 a month, or hell, if you're watching this during the premiere or for the first 24 albums of this video's release, check the link in chat or in the description for free access to the server while the floodgates are open. I try to organize regular album listening parties every Friday night, and this week we're going to try to listen to 1 or 2 of the albums I talked about in this video. So if you want to join me on your journey, hop on over. Anyways, till next time, and remember, there's always an alternative to bullshit.